Community connections with CKMS. Local sounds, thoughts, passions, and success. Celebrate local. Your neighbor's got a story to tell. Community connections, CKMS.
Happy Monday, Waterloo region. That faded out quickly. Welcome, Dwayne Jennings, to Community Connections.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bob.
Dwayne, you're the host of Classical Coffee Break. Airs on Thursdays, 3 p.m., Sundays at 4 p.m., I believe.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, just started on the repeats.
Yeah. You picked some music for us.
Yeah. The music that we'll probably listen to through the hour here is just different aspects of the kind of music that I've grown up on, listened to, and I host this classical music show, but I listen to all kinds of stuff, and it was through listening to lots of different music and different genres that eventually led me into classical. So I just wanted to kind of throw out some of the things I listened to beyond Schubert and Mozart and Beethoven that you may have associated me with.
You're a big jazz fan?
Massive jazz fan, I've been listening to jazz since I was a teenager. I grew up in Windsor, and there were some great jazz stations. Growing up, there was WJZZ, which was a commercial station, which was amazing that there was actually a commercial jazz station, but also a great national public radio station, WDET. So one was playing kind of the fusion jazz that was the jazz of the day when I was growing up. And that that was kind of rock-like, so that's how I gravitated to it. And then WDT brought me back into more of the traditional bop, post-bop kind of jazz that I love and been listening to all my life.
But all across the border.
Oh yeah.
From what I understand is that Detroit and Windsor were some of the hotbeds of cross-border contamination, if you will, that caused the CRTC to impose Canadian content rules. Oh,
absolutely. So CKLW, this is, an AM was a big thing. It was massive. You could hear it all the way down into Kentucky, Tennessee, and a 50,000 watt station. And really, it was, it was for all intents and purposes, it was a Detroit station, and Motown, basically was heard through CKLW. It was the biggest station in the Detroit market.
Really, yeah.
And I'm actually thankful that there was a station like CKLW. And later on, there were all the FM rock stations, but a station like CKLW AM was just playing anything and everything. And so growing up, it's like, I was I wanted to listen to the rock, but somehow through all that, I heard all this great soul music that just, later on, it's like I really appreciated having that in my ears, even if I didn't want to hear it at the time.
Are you a sequential genre listener? Do you have periods of time when you're listening to just jazz exclusively, periods when you're just listening to classical, other periods for just rock, or you listen to everything all mixed together?
I pretty much listen to everything, and it depends on mood. And so, you'll see that in the playlist here, but it depends on the mood. I'll throw on, like for instance, if it's like late night, I'm listening to jazz because it just makes sense to listen to jazz then. And
jazz is a late night thing.
It is, and classical, I'll listen to that at different times of the day. So it's just really what's going on mood-wise for me.
When I was young, I listened to the classical music Starlight Serenade on CFRB, 10, 11 o'clock at night. So I'd be tucked in bed, but have the radio beside me, a little earphone speaker that I'd cobble together under the pillow. So,
all right.
my thing about classical music is that you listen to that at night.
So for me, it was more listening to it in the morning. Early morning, just waking up, having a coffee.
That's when I listened to jazz, because Paul Panchayzik has a jazz show in the mornings. I know jazz is mornings for me.
Okay, well, but either way, it's based on mood, and I listen to anything and everything.
Well, you've got your classical coffee break show in the middle of the day.
Yes, so part of it was just looking at time slots available, but also I looked at it. So the name is deliberate. I'm trying to make classical music more accessible, and I looked at it as I'm retired now, but when I was working middle of the afternoon, have a coffee, allow time to catch up on some emails, do some things.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at it as music for that. And
Music to work by.
music to work by, exactly.
Ah.
And I try to look at classical, the programming for my show as music. So for a non-classical listener who maybe is interested a little bit, heard some classical they like, but not sure how to approach it, where to start. So I tried to look at it as well. If that's how I was. That's how I got into it. It was like, oh, I like this. Oh, maybe I'll listen to a bit more. And so I try to program music that's accessible to everyone and not just the music scholar.
So this isn't, sit down and seriously listen to classical music for an hour and, be absorbed by it, take notes. Not that kind of listener.
Well, I'm hoping you're going to be absorbed by it, but I'm hoping you could also, use it as a time to focus. I think it is music that demands a certain amount of attention. It's not ambient. It's not background. I mean, classical music, there's some pretty powerful stuff going on there, which is why I like it.
Yeah.
But I also think it allows you to kind of center yourself, rebalance, kind of, refocus on what you need to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've got some classical selections picked out for the playlist today.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other stuff too. Like When a Man Loves a Woman is not exactly classical music.
No, but it's an amazing piece of soul music. So I look at music. I don't put labels on it. It's kind of like, does this music grab me? Can I identify with this? Do I feel something, emotional response to it? So everything is that way. And A Man Loves a Woman, I think, is just an amazing piece of soul music. Just the vocal has never been like there's certain soul tunes that people can cover and they can do it very well. But this is a really hard one to cover because I think he created the definitive version. Like it's such a beautiful piece of soul singing that it's hard to match that. That's why I threw it out there. I think it's as valid emotionally as anything in classical music, anything in jazz.
Okay. There's certain popular music that is easy to cover, and so you have all sorts of cover versions of it, and sometimes the cover versions become more popular than the original.
Yes.
But that's not the case here.
No, that's how I feel. I mean, other people may have other opinions on that, but I think that was one where he nailed it, and no one could repeat that.
Right.
On the other hand, in jazz, there's lots of great versions of American songbook music that people have created that I think are arguably the definitive versions now.
So listen to some jazz?
Yeah, sure. So this is Miles Davis, So What? Miles Davis is one of my favorite artists in any genre. And this particular album, it's just a testament to how strong these musicians were. Miles Davis basically brought them in, showed them the chord changes to the music. We're going to go from C to G, and it's going to be in this key. Oh, you solo here, you solo over there. And they did the entire album, in one take. So not sequentially, but each song was done in one take. There was only one song, Spanish Sketches, on this album where they did 2 takes, but they kept first take anyway for the album because they thought it was better. This is, I should be mentioning, this is Kind of Blue, which I think is maybe one of the top 2 or 3 jazz albums ever recorded. So this is the opening song where Miles Davis, I think in the first 3 or 4 notes of his solo at the beginning, lays down his manifesto of cool. It's like, this is it. This is like, he just lays it down, and it's an amazing tune.
So What by Miles Davis. Very, very cool.
Yes, indeed, a cool tune. The whole album, Kind of Blue.
Yeah.
It's a classic.
I recognized it a little bit into it. There's that very slow introduction that I didn't recognize off the top. I own the album. It's one of the albums that I bought, 40 years ago when Columbia House was still a thing.
Right. Yeah, I got into it in the CD era as well. They, enhanced it. They added this second take of Spanish Sketches, which was the only second take they made for the whole album. It's if there's one jazz album you want to get, this would be it. I think. Yeah.
I may disagree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's Brubeck, Take Five.
Oh, that's a great album. That was one of the first jazz albums I ever bought. I
There's,
bought that on vinyl.
A bunch of stuff by Benny Goodman, the Carnegie Hall concert.
Carnegie Hall concert is amazing. The sound quality isn't great, but just historically,
Yeah,
and like in terms of swing, it's a masterclass in swing
Yeah.
for sure. That whole album.
yeah. So you said desert island music.
Yes, yeah. If you could only own one of this or that genre, for me personally,
Yeah. You're stuck on a desert island, you can only listen to the one thing over and over again.
this would be the album
This would
for
be
me.
the one for you?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, but then there's others. I'd be missing some Ben Webster, some Stefan Grappelli. There's all
Yeah,
kinds
yeah,
of
yeah.
stuff that I would wish I would have, but if I had to have one, I think it's this one.
Okay. I could live with it. If I was stuck on a desert island with just Kind of Blue to play over and over,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be sad.
Yeah, it's a challenge to bring it down to that one album that you'd be listening to, because there's other albums I love this album, but I don't know if I want to be listening to it for the rest of my life, or
Yeah.
the only album
Yeah.
of that genre. But this arguably is one for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
What other genres? We've talked about classical, we've talked about jazz now.
I mean, I grew up on rock, grew up on soul, growing up in the Windsor area, Motown, funk, all that was in the
Okay.
air all the time. It's Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, all those guys.
Techno, electronica.
Yes, listen. Oh, yeah, but actually more on the British end, like Prodigy and Chemical Brothers and
Okay.
guys like
okay.
that.
That's more modern.
Yeah. I mean, there was some country in there, but I'm not a huge Nashville country guy. I like a lot of
Okay.
the old time guys, like the Louvin Brothers and
Never country music listener.
Americana, like Lucinda Williams, Jason Isbell,
Okay.
people like that. Really the non-radio country kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I'm listening to country music, probably be the old time country
Yeah, the old
music.
time
Yeah,
is what I like.
40s,
And
50s.
bluegrass, I love bluegrass. And
Bluegrass,
it just,
yeah.
in terms of the musicianship, it's just, you listen to these guys, it's amazing. And there's some new bluegrass going on. It's not just Flat and Scruggs, which are great,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
people like the Brothers Comatose, if you've ever heard of them,
No.
A.J. Lee, Molly Tuttle, just amazing
Okay.
musicians. Billy Strings is another.
Okay. No, don't know any of those names.
Yeah, I look at that level of musicianship is as strong as anything in jazz, anything in classical, and it's just amazing to listen to those kind of people live.
Musicians are remarkable. I mean, it's producing that pleasurable sound out of, a box with strings on it.
Yes, and I look at it as one of the big injustices of the modern world, that a musician has to work that hard to become good at what they do, and they just aren't compensated in a way that someone
No.
throwing a ball into a net or a puck
Yeah.
into a net can make gazillions of dollars, and a musician is toiling away in obscurity
Yeah.
in some little place. And I think
And
that-
worse, loses the rights to their own music.
Yes.
frequently. That doesn't happen so much anymore, I don't think. A lot of people are going independent of the big labels that take away their rights. And a lot of people have bought back the rights from the big labels.
Yeah, but still, we've largely taken away their primary source of income, which was music you bought, either on vinyl, cassette, CD, streaming. They're making thousands of pennies.
Yeah, well, not even thousands of pennies, fractions of pennies.
No, well, I mean, like in total,
Yeah. Yeah.
they make maybe
And
$50 or
even
$60.
the collectives like SOCAN and whatnot, they don't pay much either.
Yeah,
It's my father-in-law wrote, I don't know, maybe 100 songs, maybe 200 songs, that he mostly sold to other musicians to play. And he finally ended up with his own album, maybe 4 or 5 years before he passed away. But a lot of other musicians played his music. And so there should have been royalties rolling in, and his royalties were like $2.50, $5 maybe. And that was it, until he got picked up by one of the big mainstream players, Martin Gore, who on his Counterfeit album had one of my dad's songs, my father-in-law's songs, on the album.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, The Cast of Lonesome Shadow. And suddenly, there were 3 digits of money coming in. That
Okay.
lasted for a little while, only a year or so, while that album was popular.
Yeah.
But it really took a large label, a large distributor to make that kind of money happen.
Yeah. So then what are they left with? They're left with playing live and merchandise
Yeah.
at those live venues. But, there are only some musicians who can pack in a stadium and make money. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who are just as talented who just can't do
Yeah,
that.
a lot of people are making a living. They're surviving by playing music in live bars. Maybe a bit of merch, maybe selling the CDs. Although I don't know that selling CDs is so common anymore.
No.
Who still buys CDs? I don't even think cars come with CD players
No,
anymore.
no.
No. So they have to supplement their income either
Yeah.
by teaching music or doing something completely unrelated. And then going out afterwards, stomping around to the various bars and musical venues to play some music live to
Yeah.
get
yeah.
their art out there.
There was a great book a few years ago that David Byrne from Talking Heads wrote, How Music Works. And he talks a lot about this whole new era. And he said, musicians now have the ability to get to a much broader audience than they ever did before. Previously, they had to get picked up by a record label, and the record label had to promote them, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So the irony is they can get out to the whole world if only the world knew about them. And how do they do that?
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
Well, that's people are using social media for, but I don't know if that's necessarily a universal way of getting your name out there either.
Well, you could cultivate a following of sorts, and for some that's better than what they would have been able to do before if they were not
Yeah.
picked up by a label. But there are limitations to that. They're not like for instance, getting into Spotify or Apple Music, and Dave Byrne talks about this as well. It's like, great, you're on their shelf, you're in there, but it's like a 10,000 square foot warehouse, and you're in the back. And the most well-known are in the front as you walk in the door. If you don't know about that music in the very back, you're never going to hear it.
There's other distributors that want to be paid to distribute your music.
Yeah.
So the musicians have to pay out to get their music on the shelf in the first place.
Yeah.
And the payments don't come in until they have thousands and thousands of streams on that service.
Yeah, and the algorithm isn't going to promote them if it's not seeing
Right.
that kind of movement. So
Yeah,
it's not
so
going to suggest it as something for you as a listener.
The ones that are already popular get more popular.
Yes.
And the ones
Yeah.
that are not so popular fade into obscurity.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
I don't know. There's something to be said for bypassing all those streaming services, all those distributors, and just, giving people free rein to download your music, no charge, take my music, please.
Yeah,
And then rely entirely on the personal appearances, the merch,
yeah.
the patronage, people just giving you money because you've produced some nice music already.
Yeah, and there's some alternative arrangements that people are trying, Bandcamp and some of these other things. But yeah, we are in this period of transition for musicians away from the old world and the old way of old sources of revenue, and we're not. I don't think we've quite solidified where the new world is going yet. But
I don't think the old world is anywhere close to dying out. I mean, you look at the
Yeah.
Taylor Swift concerts that
yes,
came
yeah.
to Toronto a few months back, and tickets going for thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine spending $1,000 to be stuck in a bleacher seat way up in the rafters someplace.
So
listen.
I'm the same way, and maybe it's just because I'm an old guy now, but I'm not up for that. And I also look at it as like I'm a major fan of the Jazz Room in Waterloo, season pass holder.
I've never been to the Jazz Room.
Oh, it's an amazing place, and some of the best musicians I've ever seen in my life in any genre have been in there. And I'm thinking, this is like 5 or 10 minute drive for me to get here. I have a bite to eat, listen to some good music, I can go home, and it's totally satisfying. And then I think, or I could be spending $200 for a ticket in the bleachers, way the hell up there, with the person beside me throwing up in my shoe while I'm trying to listen to this band that look the size of ants. And I think, I'm just not going to do that anymore.
Yeah. Listen to another track?
Yeah. I don't know if you could cue up the Kinks' Waterloo Sunset.
Okay. Not jazz.
Not jazz.
No.
I'm just kind of throwing out some other genres. So, I mean, I'm a huge rock fan, and I would have been just a little kid when this song came out, but I really appreciate 60s pop and the songcraft that was
Okay.
going on. And this song has kind of taken on a life of its own. People like Paul Weller, if you're familiar with him from the Jam Style Council, he argued that this was maybe the best piece of 60s pop ever, greater than the Beatles. It's just a beautiful melody. And I thought, here we are at Radio Waterloo. I'm going to throw it in here. This is the Kinks' Waterloo Sunset.
Dirty old river, must you keep rolling, into the night. People so busy, make me feel dizzy. Taxi light shine so bright, but I don't need no friend. As long as I gaze on Waterloo sunset, I am in paradise. Every day I look at the world from my window. Chilly, chilly is the evening time. Waterloo sunset's fine. Waterloo sunset's fine. Terry meets Julie, Waterloo Station, every Friday night. But I am so lazy, no one to wonder. I stay at home at night. But I don't feel afraid, as long as I gaze on Waterloo sunset, I am in paradise. Every day I look at the world from my window. Chilly, chilly is the evening time. Waterloo sunset's fine. Waterloo sunset's fine. Millions of people swarming like flies round Waterloo underground. But Terry and Julie cross over the river, perfectly safe and sound. And they don't need no friends, as long as they gaze on Waterloo sunset, they are in paradise. Waterloo sunset's fine. Waterloo sunset's fine. Waterloo sunset's
Waterloo Sunset, not this Waterloo,
But close enough.
close enough. Waterloo in London,
Yes.
very poppy. You're talking about how similar this sounded to Pink Floyd's See Emily Play.
Yeah, it was what was in the
It was
air.
actually the Beatles first, wasn't it?
Pardon me?
See Emily Play was.
No, that was Pink Floyd. That was
was Pink Floyd
Sid
first?
Barrett
Yeah,
era Pink
I
Floyd.
know they did that. I've heard it done by other bands too. So.
Yeah. I think David Bowie did a cover of
Yeah.
it at one point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very similar, all from that era, and from what I've read in biographies, everybody knew everybody.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it would have been one of those magical periods for artists. In this case, pop
Yeah.
writers, but there was just something in the air, definitely in Carnaby Street and places like that. That was London of the mid to late 60s.
You mentioned something that I'd never heard of before, the Laws.
Yes. Yeah. So the Laws, we were talking what the song was going on. Great band. They did one album in 1990, 1991. The Laws is in LA apostrophe S, which is, so they're from Liverpool, And laws is, or law is a short form of lad, like, hey, law.
Ah.
They did an album that was from beginning to end just magical, and they try to emulate that kind of time period as what we were just listening to. Great stuff. The album is only like 36 or 37 minutes long. They just felt that they had something they needed to say, and they weren't going to say anymore. And it was just one great tune after another. If you've heard "There She Goes," that might have been the one song we would have heard on these shores. But anyway, a long-winded way of saying they recognize the greatness of the British pop scene in the mid, like 1965, 66, 67, that time period, and they tried to emulate that in their writing.
Okay.
And they influenced bands like Oasis. Wouldn't have been possible without the laws.
Really?
Like that whole Brit pop scene.
Okay. I remember Oasis drifting by in the mid-'80s or so.
It would have been in the 90s, mid-90s.
90s already?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And, bands like Blur, Oasis, Boo Radleys, if you've ever heard of them. None of those bands I don't think would have been possible without the laws.
Boo Radley I only know from the movie.
The Kill a
Mockingbird.
Kill a Mockingbird,
Yes,
yeah. But
yeah.
anyway,
There was a band name for Boo Radley.
well, in this time period, the early 90s, while everyone over here was listening to all kinds of grunge, my eyes were looking to the other side of the Atlantic, and there was a great British scene that we never really heard much over here.
Okay.
And
Obviously left me behind.
yeah, well, and you had to look for it. This would have been pre-internet days, so it's not like you can just pull it up on YouTube.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of great music going on. But all of those bands were kind of looking to what was happening in the mid '60s in Britain, and this would have been like the next generation or two of British musicians, and that's what they were getting into when we over here.
Post Beatles.
Oh, post Beatles, post '80s synth rock.
Post synth pop.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
This is like a new generation of early to mid
Right.
'90s
I was just
British artists.
too busy head down working without listening to music at that time. of
Oh,
my
yeah.
life, I think so.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
I love that time period, and I didn't hear it as a kid myself, but I came to it later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now you're doing classical music.
Yes. So classical. Again, it's just as a regular fan of music, not a music scholar. Probably listened to all that great prog rock back in the day, like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Yes, and all that.
Okay, but they play classical music.
Oh, they did, and that's what kind of introduced me to classical music. And then, as I started to have enough money to start buying records and things, I discovered classical music, and then I discovered that libraries had collections of classical music, and it's like, oh, well, okay, I'll try this, I'll try that. And so the classical I listen to, the classical I play in the show, is just classical that speaks to me. And there's a lot of classical music that doesn't speak to me, and I'm probably not going to play. But if you think about it, you as a music listener, you can say you like rock, but it doesn't mean you like every single band or every single sort of subgenre of rock. You just listen to what connects with you. And it's the same with classical music. So if you're interested in classical music, find a piece that pulls you in emotionally. And if you like that, find something else from that artist and kind of work your way from there. And that's how I did it. And then the other thing I want to say about classical music, and we'll cue up a piece from Rebecca Dale. So a lot of people get the perception, well, classical music, that's like old music. It's hundreds of years old. And yes, that's absolutely right. But there's a lot of new classical composers out there. You have to look for them, but these days, looking online, you can find that stuff, and there's some great stuff going on. And the piece I want to play from Rebecca Dale. So she's a young classical composer. This one is called "The Cloths of Heaven," and the lyrics in this are from W.B. Yeats, famous Irish poet, and it's just an amazing sentiment, but it's talking about a person who loves another person can't afford to buy them anything. So it's like, if I can give you the cloths of heaven, I would, but all I can give you are my dreams. So please do not trample on my dreams. It's basically what it's saying, and it's just a beautiful sentiment. If you ever, if you can kind of make out what they're singing, check out the actual poem. It's pretty powerful, and I think this is a great. She did a great job of setting that poem to music here.
Okay.
I don't know if you could find it in.
It's there, yeah.
All right. Well, let's have a listen to it. So this is Rebecca Dales. This is modern classical music, and I think everything I've heard from her, she's put out 2 albums of music, and both are amazing. So I think she's got a great future ahead of her.
Some choral music.
Yes.
Rebecca Dale?
Rebecca Dale, that's Claws of Heaven. It's from an album called Night Seasons that came out last year and was one of my favorite albums of the year. It's just beautiful from beginning to end. And even if you're not a fan of classical music, I think there's something in there that you can identify with. I think as a contemporary composer,
Okay.
just her sensibility is something. The chords, how the music progresses, you would feel comfortable in it versus being thrown into, I don't know, Renaissance music, and it's so unlike anything you've ever heard. I think there's something in here you can identify with.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was sort of washed over us as we were sitting here talking in the studio.
Yeah.
But very pleasant. Certainly something that you could listen to on a classical coffee break.
Yes, exactly. And I've featured Rebecca Dale more than a few times in the classical coffee
Okay.
break, including that too.
Good, good. Always good to promote up-and-coming musicians.
Yeah, yeah.
So you've got some Carl Orff in the playlist here as well.
Yeah, so Carl Orff, he's kind of a one-hit wonder as far as
Yes.
classical guys go. People only remember him for Carmina Miranda, and this is a tune from that. But it's not the big.
Oh, okay.
It's not the big brash.
Yeah.
I think O Fortuna.
Yes, that's it. Fortuna, that's right.
Is what everyone would associate with this. This is like a small little tune that is a character wondering whether she should become a nun or fall in love. So it's like, devil on her shoulder, angel on her shoulder, which way she should go. And even though you won't be able to understand the music because it's in a different language, you're going to understand the melody because it just pulls at your heart. It's just such a beautiful melody. And that's the things that I look for in classical. I was drawn to classical for the beauty in the same way I was drawn to, I don't know, the Beatles' Blackbird or something like that. There's certain tunes where you go, man, that's a beautiful tune.
Yes.
And I could hear that in some classical pieces, and that's what kind of inspired me to keep looking for that in classical. And so you hear a lot of that on the classical coffee break because that's what I'm drawn to. And it's the slow movements, the adagio, the largo. These are Italian direction in music to play slow. And because
Right.
to me, it's the beauty that speaks to me in classical music. And this is a piece that I think is a good example.
You said it's not English choral music? It's
No. So this is from an opera.
Uh-huh.
So it's an Italian opera, and
okay.
so you'd need to look at an English translation, but
Okay. Unless you happen to speak Italian.
exactly. But you don't need
Not the Carl Orff I was expecting.
no, but a beautiful tune all the same. It's
Yeah.
just a timeless melody.
We're talking about just music, and I was going to tell you that. Well, you told me that we grew up with the electric guitar. And the
Yeah,
electric guitar
yeah.
was probably a relatively new instrument when we were kids.
Yes.
I remember being about 5 or 6 years old, having lunch, at home with my mom, and mom explaining, oh yeah, that's electric guitar music, and not getting up to change the channel on the radio, but certainly not expressing a great love for the instrument.
No, but for us growing up on it, that was just the basic sonic vehicle of rock and roll. That was the instrument.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the very first record that I bought was a classical record.
Really?
Yeah, Tchaikovsky, and the fellow who did the New World Symphony, Dvorak.
Oh, Dvorak,
Yeah,
yeah. And that's an
So-
amazing piece of music.
Yeah, flip sides. It's I can't remember what the Tchaikovsky piece was, but it was a New World Symphony on the flip side of that.
So what led you to buy that? Because I mean, as a kid, that would have been like the last thing I would have bought.
Yeah?
Growing up on rock and soul and all that kind of stuff.
I don't know.
I mean, I understand now. It's all those
Yeah.
great pieces of music.
Listening to that electric guitar on the radio, and I guess sensing a mum's disapproval, I don't actually recall listening to a lot of classical music as a very young child. So I was, 14, 15 when I bought that album. But I'd been listening to classical music for a while at that point. I guess, at night listening
Yeah.
to CFRB, the late night classical music show there. That's
Okay.
probably what got me
Yeah,
listening
yeah.
to the music, and in turn going out and buying it. So that phase lasted a bunch of years until I guess I got into high school, and then electronica took over. Tomita, Milton
yes.
Subotnick.
Yeah,
And so did that for many, many years. Listened to mostly, exclusively what was then very, very modern synthesizer music.
Yes, yes.
Um,
And a
after
lot of
that-
those guys covered classical music. I think there's a number of versions of Holt's Planets
Yeah.
done by those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Wendy Carlos and switched on Bach.
Yes,
So
right.
that would have been the big album that broke the synthesizer into mainstream.
Yes, there was like a whole side industry in that.
Yeah, yeah. Then I from there I progressed into jazz for a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and just lately I've been really appreciating heavy metal music.
Okay.
I don't know. It strikes me. It's there's a lot of musicianship involved.
Oh, yes,
in that.
yes.
It's-
And there's parallels between that and some pretty heavy-duty classical music, just in terms of its structure, and the power that it conveys.
yeah. I think we have time for one last track that I'll probably have to talk over to give the end credits.
Okay.
You want to introduce us?
Yeah. So this is Stefan Grappelli, who's a swing violinist, played in the 30s with Django Reinhardt, if you're familiar with him. Gypsy swing is kind of what it was coined in those days. Amazing violinist, kind of introduced me, in a sense, to the violin. Playing with George Shearing, who's a great jazz pianist, immortalized in Jack Kerouac's On the Road, if you've read that. And this is The Folks Who Live on the Hill, which is a great Jerome Kern tune. And it's just a beautiful piece of music.
Okay. Want to just hype your show one more time before we start this up?
Okay, so my name's Dwayne Jennings, and I host the Classical Coffee Break on Thursdays, 3 o'clock, repeated Sundays at 4 o'clock. And if you're new to classical music or just a classical music fan, there's something in there for all of you, and invite you to join me.
But today, it's Stefan Grappelli and some jazz.
Yep.
Listening to CKMS FM, Radio Waterloo. This is CKMS Community Connections for July the 7th, 2025. You had Dwayne Jennings in the studio talking about his journey in music. Currently listening to Stefan Grappelli and George Shearing. CKMS Community Connections is produced at Radio Waterloo, sponsored by Radio Waterloo. Executive producer is Jennifer Strong. My name is Bob Jonkman. We air every Monday at 11 o'clock, alternate Fridays at 3 p.m. And I'll be back then.